So, ladies and gentlemen, I think what I really wanted to do here, because today we've got 5 guest speakers that really registered in the recent system that we all commonly known as the new registration system. So as you can see, I got registered donkey years ago. And basically my registration was based on the legacy system. So it was very crucial for me to ensure that the speakers that are coming to share tips with you today are really people who have undergone the process as soon as like this year or last year, because the information is still fresh, the information is still relevant. So Refula, I'll just go to the next slide. So really what I wanted to do, ladies and gentlemen, is I get on a weekly basis inquiries from my mentees. I think most of you know that I've got 4 coaching groups on WhatsApp, and currently all those groups are full. So maybe after today's event, we might have to open another group to accommodate the new candidates. But really what I wanted to share as the opening of, before we have our guest speakers, is really the do's that you should be following when preparing for your interviews. So really what I've done here is I've focused on the interviews, because we will have 5 speakers that will in terms of interviews and doing your application. So for me, I want you guys to just know today that when you are called for a professional review, so typically at EXA, if anyone talks about a review, you must know that they are referring to the professional interview that will be done. And really, I've already said to everyone that when we go to the experience appraisal, this is a paper exercise of checking that what you have submitted is adequate. If you do pass the EA, so commonly known as the EA, then you go to the ER, which is the experience appraisal. And basically, when you get to that interview, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. And really in this slide, I want to share tips of things that you guys should be doing to ensure that you win at that interview. So first and foremost, I know that some of the candidates that might be joining us today in this platform are really not well versed with the new registration system. So the first point I want you guys to be conscious of is that when you go for that interview, the interview is going to be an hour long. The first 15 minutes of the interview is supposed to be the candidate presenting. Now, what normally happens in this 15 minutes is that a lot of candidates that find themselves declined is because during this presentation, for example, the candidate presents outcome 1. Before they even move on to outcome 2, you find the reviewers starting to ask questions to the candidates. And naturally, what will happen with that is that you will not be able to do your presentation within 50 minutes. What I urge you to do is, please, when you get to that interview room, find the most polite way of asking the reviewers to afford you this 15 minutes uninterrupted. If you go and look at the registration standard, you will see that anyways, that interview is supposed to be 15 minutes and uninterrupted. But because sometimes it does happen that after you present like outcome 1, people start having point of clarity and those things, really, I want you guys to protect yourself and get in there and say, please, may I present my 15 minutes uninterrupted, and then we can take the Q&As after that. Another crucial thing that all of us should be noting is that in that presentation, you need to give evidence for all the 11 outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, this interview, or rather this presentation, is similar to your engineering report. You need to cover all the 11 outcomes. So I think I've helped about probably 20 candidates recently with regards to preparing their interview presentation. And normally what I observe is that the candidates forget to talk about outcome 11. Why? Because they simply think it's in the registration, the reviewers are already aware of it. What I want you guys to understand is that that presentation needs to cover all the 11 outcomes. So you definitely need to add outcome 11. Now, when you start the presentation, now we have already spoken about the fact that all the 11 outcomes will need to be covered in the presentation. However, what I want you guys to also be conscious of is before you even get into the 11 outcomes, you need to have a slide where you are going to summarize your education and your experience. So in this slide, try and capture really the evidence that's, well, your history, in a sense, that's going to transfer your area of competence. So in other words, if you are somebody who happens to have worked for one company, it is really great because it means your training would have been through the full chain of that company. But if you have changed companies throughout your training, those are the type of aspects that you will need to capture in that presentation. And then of course your experience, your education. Ladies and gentlemen, if you happen to be somebody who has done a master's, who has done a project management postgraduate qualification, those are the type of things that you should add there, because they are going to really add some juice to the 11 outcomes. And then a lot of people ask me, Lebo, how should I prepare this presentation? So this next point just says to you guys, really in terms of the optimal way to ensure that you do justice to each outcome is that you should really be creating a slide per outcome. So outcome one slide, outcome two, its own slide, outcome three, its own slide. Ladies and gentlemen, if you find yourself creating 2 slides per outcome, you know that something is not right. So I want you to understand that you should be creating 1 slide per outcome. And also, as you can see, 15 minutes is not a long time. So what you should be doing in those slides that you will be creating per outcome is that you need to use the strongest evidence that you have in the application form. So one of the things that you cannot do in that presentation is introduce work that is not in the application. So in other words, the registration process does take a while to, in the process while it gets assessed and the likes. So a lot of people get to do a lot of interesting work from the time they register to the time they go to the interview. But what is important for you guys to understand is that in that presentation, you can only really speak about information that is in the application. Then I noticed that when people give me their draft presentation, when we are doing the preparation and the dry run, is that they tend to get confused in terms of what evidence can they use for the 11 outcomes. And really what I want to say to you guys is that the experience appraisal is based on evidence that is submitted in the engineering report. And remember, in all these other classes we've had, we are constantly communicating that the information that you put in the engineering report is going to be your most complex, where you are the responsible person. So then what it says here is that the engineering report really is written evidence of your competence, and then the interview is verbal. So what you should be doing is you should be using your engineering report as the backbone for that presentation. So really these points capture a high level guideline of how you should be preparing the presentation. And then I want to just talk about some things that you should not be doing. Refila, next slide. So now, one of the things that I think candidates, they say, I want to give too much evidence sometimes. I don't know why they do that, because 15 minutes is really not a long time. So what I want you guys to not do is don't go and choose random examples all over your report. For example, in the TRs and that. Rather focus on the engineering report, and really what you should be doing is choosing your most complex evidence where you are the responsible person. Do not give more than 2 examples. A lot of people go for each outcome, they give 5 to 6 examples. You don't need to do that. The minute you focus on your most complex example, most complex evidence where you are the responsible person, really 2 examples is adequate per outcome. You will see some of the outcomes really even 2 is an overkill. But I just want to then elaborate on when I say 2 examples. For example, if you go to outcome 7 naturally is going to force you to list the standards that you comply to when you are basically developing some solution to a particular engineering problem. So obviously, if you are listing the standards you have applied to, the standards might be more than 2. Obviously, it might be a list of 4 or 5 standards. But what I am alluding to here is the actual problem that was solved. So if you are going to use like some sort of experience from your report as evidence, 2 examples are enough. You don't need to do more than 2. Another thing that I want to really caution everybody to is you should not be adding things you are not sure about. Sometimes, as you become more competent, you obviously get exposed to certain things in the workplace. And then when you prepare your presentation, you might be tempted to start using words and really sophisticated terms because it really sounds nice. But don't do that if you are not sure about the work that you are reflecting there, because the reality of the matter is that After you give this 15 minutes presentation, you will see that the rest of the 45 minutes is going to be used for the reviewers to ask you questions. So just bear in mind that you can be asked about something as specific as formulas that you use for calculation and procedures that you followed. So really what you should be doing in that presentation is just putting everything that you are 100% sure about. The other thing that I want to say is that naturally, when you go and do something that you really care about, and more specifically, something that's going to benefit you in your career progression, you are going to have nerves. But ladies and gentlemen, I really, really, really urge you to make a plan. If you do feel like in terms of your confidence, you know, it's a little bit lagging, rather go and book our confidence coach. Remember Ketiwe, she's been a part of our interview master classes. Rather go and book Ketiwe to make sure that you know she's going to give you tips of how to boost your confidence, because really what you should be doing in that interview to show off your competence, you need to be confident and you need to be content. I always say to the candidates that remember this information that needs to be transferred to the reviewers, only you know about it, and you are the only person who can really leave that room making sure that they understand what you are talking about. So don't let the nerves take over. I know it's going to happen, but after you do your introduction, allow your nerves to really settle down. Another thing that's going to help you with the panic is that, you know, a lot of people, I see them, you know, apparently also the notice that maybe they get for the PR comes last minute, I don't know. But what you should not be doing, ladies and gentlemen, is taking chances. I want all of you to go and prepare this presentation, and then you need to practice. Why are you practicing? When you are practicing is for you to ensure that the presentation is within 15 minutes and less, because the minute you jump 15 minutes, let's say 16, if they forgive you 1 minute, they might give you. But if the minute you jump 16, obviously you have not complied to the requirements of the presentation. So really I mean, for those guys that actually, you know, work with me to prepare that presentation, we do a dry run. And if we have above 15 minutes, there will be these nice to have information that we will remove from the presentation. Another thing that I want to caution you guys about that really affects confidence is connectivity. If you are going to connect to a network that is not stable and it's going to cut you, when you speak, you are going to be breaking here and there. Naturally, that thing is going to induce some nerves. So I want you guys to make sure that when you go for this interview, you connect to a solid network that will not give you problems, because really it is a life thing that if the reviewers keep saying, oh, no, Lebo, I didn't hear you. Please repeat yourself. Lebo, please come again. Naturally, what this is going to do is it's going to induce some level of nerves in your system. So Refile, that is it from me. So that was just a high level guide of really what our candidates should be doing and not doing in the presentation. Thank you, Refile.
Yeah, so as indicated while Refile is doing that, my name is Yanko Panda. I am a professionally registered civil engineer practicing in the traffic and transport space, which I've been doing for the past 9 years or so. And what I'm going to look at, or what I'm going to discuss this afternoon, are some of the do's and don'ts, or some tricks that can be used in order to prepare for the interview. So just as a disclaimer, there is no one formula that works for everybody, as you'll hear from the different speakers, but these are just strategies that each of us can use, or strategies that you can implement and sort of like fine tune for yourself, just to help you better prepare for the whole process up until registration. So in terms of the do's, which are on the left from my side, as Lebo rightfully indicated, when you get called for that interview, practice your presentation, or practice how you're going to deliver that presentation, because you have no idea how quickly 15 minutes can go by. So by practicing, it also helps to boost your confidence and try to calm your nerves, because then you're not trying to use fancy words or try to think of how to make yourself sound competent. So practice, practice, practice. Even if, no matter how short your notice period is, make time to practice. Because like in my instance, I got the email to say that my interview is on a Wednesday. I got it Friday evening, but I only saw the email Saturday morning. So within those 4 days, I had to practice, and I engaged with other people who helped me prepare, as Lebo also rightfully indicated. Going through it with other people also helps you to sort of like hone in or fine tune how you're going to deliver your presentation. And then also volunteering is very key because it shows that you have a vested interest in what you are doing as well as the profession. And by including it, it also works in your favors because it's showing that you are continuously going to be developing yourself. You are continuously trying to figure out what is happening in the industry and are keeping abreast with what is happening in the industry. So any voluntary work that you do that is industry related, even some of the work that is not industry related, but shows another softer side of you, include that in your presentation. And then what I also found and what I was tipped on a lot was that I need to understand the construction regulations. It was actually one of the feedbacks that I got from my panel of reviewers. And what they meant, or what this means, is that sometimes, especially as consultants, because I've been working in the consulting engineering space, we tend to think that whatever designs we propose have no impact. So by understanding the construction regulations, which is your OHSs, your NEMAs, and so forth, you understand that everything you bring or everything you try implement has an impact that needs to be circumvented or mitigated as far as is feasibly possible. And you need to understand that whenever you bring something into a space, it is going to affect, but to what limitations can you bring that sort of disruption without completely killing off, let's say, natural existing ecosystem? Another key thing I found was that whenever something was unclear, ask a question, ask for clarity. It's better to ask and have them paraphrase or make sure that you understood than to just assume you understand what they are asking you. And by asking for clarity, what this does is that it helps you gain the confidence. It helps you think of a solution, because by me saying, if they ask a question like, what is your favorite color? By you saying, just to make sure, I'm trying to understand that what you want to know is what color appeals to me. You are already conditioning your brain to start answering that particular question and not wander off. And you are then making sure that you are understanding what it is that they need to, what response they want. And it also mitigates against them asking you another question on top of another question, trying to lead you to get to the response that they want. So rather ask, be clear, and answer what they want. Another key thing I found was that it's okay to say you don't know. I know most people, because we feel like we're trying to prove that we know, we feel like we need to be able to answer everything. Sometimes they can try, not that they're trying to trip you up, but to check that you are going to work within your area of specialization and not work outside your mandate. They might ask you something that is not necessarily linked to you. So you should be able to say that, you know what, I don't know, or this is outside my area of specialization or outside of my jurisdiction. So I believe that, you know what, yeah, I can't answer that question. So it is okay not to know, because what also that does is that it shows that you know your limitations and are willing to learn. And yeah, you're not going to come across as being cocky as well if you admit that you do not know. And to be quite honest, they don't expect you to know everything. I mean, one of the feedback pointers I got was that one is continuously learning. Even though one of the individuals on my panel was a retiree, he told me that, you know what, you're always going to learn. So always have an open mind, and be willing to be guided, so to speak. Another key tip that I got was that prepare a minimum of 2 questions, your own questions that you will want to ask them, because after your interview session, there will be a Q&A session. So they will ask, is there anything that you want to ask, or is there anything that is not clear? So the reason why you prepare, I advise you to prepare the 2 questions is just in case when you go through the interview process, as Lebo indicated, when you get to the PR stage of the interviewing process, it's just a formality. In essence, it's like saying, we've checked everything, you've demonstrated the competence, but we want to make sure that this is you really did all of this. So it just helps when you prepare the two, that if everything is clear, there's you sorted out whatever needed to be sorted out in your presentation, and yeah, everything goes smoothly, you can then engage the panel. So that then leads to me the next point where I said, think of this as a peer conversation. And by that, it means that if you think of don't think of the interview as a teacher-pupil process, teacher being the reviewers and you being the pupil. Rather think of it as, I'm engaging with my peers. Most of us have worked for 5+ years. We have experience in our chosen career paths, or our chosen career paths. So we also know something that the reviewers might not know. As Lebo also indicated, she got her PR a while back. So there's some changes that have happened that she might not be aware of. So it's the same with industry and the way technology is advancing. There are some things that your reviewers, or the way that your reviewers are doing engineering, so to speak, at the time, might have differed with the advances. Maybe there's something that they might not know. So you could also be teaching them. So by thinking of it as a peer conversation instead of a teacher pupil relationship, it also helps, I found, to calm your nerves and to have, or to demonstrate that confidence and competence in what you are trying to bring across. And then in terms of the don'ts, this links with the first do point, which was to practice. Do not come unprepared. No matter how short the notice period is, prepare yourself. You'd be surprised that by telling people that you're going for this, how many people are willing to put their hands up to assist you. I had some colleagues and my mentor offering their Monday evening just to help me go through my presentation. And I found by doing that, it helped me, because I had to completely change the format. The way I planned to do it was not going to help me in any way, because it was not it was not bringing across my strong points. It was not demonstrating my competence. It was not showing that I had done the work and I was knowledgeable enough in what I was, or in what I'd written and submitted to EXA. So prepare, do not come unprepared. And that also links to, as Lebu said, that even where you're going to hold the interview, prepare that space beforehand. So I went to the office, I booked a boardroom. I told people not to interrupt me between this period because I'm doing something important. You don't necessarily have to tell them what it is, but it's like, you know what, prepare yourself for that interview. Even driving to work that morning, I listened to motivational music that, you know, like those songs like I Came to Win, This Is My Time. So do things that will help also calm your nerves. So by being prepared, I find that also helps you be calm and just be confident. So come prepared. And as Lebo rightfully also alluded in terms of preparing the presentations, if you have too much text, then it becomes a problem. So I recently helped a gentleman prepare for his interview, and his presentation had too much text. You don't need to write everything you're going to say. Rather bullet point and speak to certain things, because that way what that does is that it also prevents you reading what you want to say, and it also prevents you saying too much, which can then make you exceed the 15-minute period that they've given you. Another don't is to answer outside your professional scope. So as indicators, that sometimes they'll ask you a question just to check how ethical are you going to be. So if something is outside your scope, because one of the questions they asked me was, let's say I get my PR today, and then I'm asked to design an embankment. Am I going to do it? And I mean, it's clear as day. I'm not a water person. I'm not a geotech person. I'm not a structures, whatever. So it's outside of my jurisdiction. So it's okay to tell them that, no, I'm not going to do that, or I can't do that because I've honed my skill set in this area. And the reason why I also won't do that is that by you practicing in a certain space, you develop sort of like an aptitude or a gut feeling towards certain ways of analyzing and producing your solutions. So by you acting outside that scope, you might do something that will actually end up endangering a lot of lives. So do not, that's a big key thing. Do not act outside your professional scope. And then that also links to one of the outcomes, which is the ethics. Are you able to operate within your chosen bounds or within your bounds? As Lebo also indicated, one of the key things I also advise is that do not include work that you did not do. And the reason why this is very, very important is that I have an instance where a friend of mine went for an interview. It's a project she worked on, and she got asked a certain question. And she was tempted to try maneuver a response, but eventually she said, no, I got involved at this stage of the project, hence I only looked at that stage. And it was very good that she did that, because you never know if the people interviewing have also worked on that project. So then it shows that you are being unethical, which means you are not adhering to the EXA code of conduct, as well as some of the one of the outcomes, which is ethics, which is a very, very important outcome as well that EXA wants to, or we need to adhere to as professionals and as people in a society. Another don't is don't be in a hurry to answer the question. So think of a response that you're gonna give. And what this does is that when you're in a hurry to answer a question, you end up not answering what they are asking you. And sometimes it can come across as if you are being cocky because you are not allowing the reviewer to finish what they're asking you. You are assuming you understand what they want to ask you. So let them finish. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time, especially for the Q&A. As Lebo indicated, you are given about an hour for the whole process. So as long as you've done justice to the presentation, which is within the 15 minutes, the Q&A can last a bit longer, but they will also guide you. So if you are not going where they want you to go, they will let you know. So take your time, think your responses through, and yeah, that will also help with just calming your nerves and making sure that you demonstrate the competence and the confidence required as a professional. And lastly, my don't is that do not be afraid to disagree. This comes in especially during the Q&A. If you have a difference of an opinion, it's okay. That's how sometimes you get to understand or appreciate a different school of thought. But there's a difference as well by saying, do not be afraid to disagree. Don't be rude about how you disagree. You can politely say, yes, Lebo, I hear what you're saying, but I beg to differ because of 1, 2, 3. So in that way, you are acknowledging that Lebo's opinion is important, but this is how you see it. And it also allows for the both of you to engage and teach each other in the process, which is what I think us being professionals and us being in this space is all about. We will never know everything, and hence, even in a project, especially like multidisciplinary projects, everybody brings a different skill set, but at the end of the day, all those skill sets come together for a purpose, which is to serve society, which is what engineering is all about. So in short, those are my registration tips and tricks, the do's and don'ts. Thank you very much, Refilwe.
Thanks, Lidira, for the time, and thanks everyone for coming in for this session. And I'd also like to thank Lebo for organizing this and getting us together to share our information. Actually, I've been helped by Lebo also to get where I am in terms of getting professionally registered with EXA. And here are some of the interview tips and tricks that I'd love to share with you. The way I've structured them is this first slide will be on what you do as soon as you get the email from EXA that says that you'll be going for a professional review. And then the second part will focus on what to do during the professional review. I'd like to also state that some of the tips that I've stated here, the other speakers have probably covered them, but then I guess it will just be a bit quicker. Okay, so the first one, as soon as you get that letter, they will have a short guide on what to do to prepare for the review. So please go and read and understand the EXA guidelines for a format of your presentation, and also talk to the recently registered engineers. As Lebo has emphasized at the beginning, that sometimes you might find yourself speaking to someone who registered during the legacy system, and maybe their information may be a bit outdated. depending on how involved they are with EXA. For example, she's more involved in terms of mentoring people and helping them get registered. So she has more fresher information. And then the next one is, if you have a mentor, please consult them, speak to them and let them know that, okay, now the experience appraisal, which is a process that EXA goes through to check if you qualify for a professional review, is done, and then your mentor will help you prepare, will give you some of the tips that you may require. And if you don't have a mentor, I'd like to request you to get one now. I actually did not have a mentor, and I sent through my stuff. I declined, and then I met Lebu as my mentor, and then I actually just edited my report and put it in a different structure and send it again. I think it was last year. I got declined, I think in May, and then again in July. And then the full process took about 4 months since I got registered in November. And then the next one is do a dry run with someone who's already registered. Present to them, and they will be correcting you here and there and telling you what to say and what not to say, the things that you should remove in your presentation, because sometimes you might go for an overkill, or you might put information that they believe is not required. Lebu, in terms of her coaching, she'll also do a dry run with you, say you are under her, and she'll assist you prepare for that review. The most important thing, though, I think you need to revise your report and any relevant documents. By any relevant documents, I'm referring to, let's say you're talking about a project where you were doing a pump station design. Go and look at the drawings that you prepared that project. Go and look at if there were permissions that you needed to be granted. Say maybe there was an EIA, there was a water use license application. Go through those documents before you go for the review. Basically, anything that you've mentioned in your report, you should revise. And okay, there are things that are secondary because we are engineers. Our main focus will probably be on design and maybe site supervision. But then there's things like your environmental impact assessments. I think they are covered in outcomes, I think 8 and 9, somewhere there. So go through those also just to understand them. You don't have to know them like an environmentalist would know them. And then, like I said, go through your documents, your tender documents. And then the next one is, please go through the code of conduct also, because there will be some questions where they won't ask you a direct question with it. Okay, state maybe 3 items that are listed in the code of conduct. They'll probably ask you about, I think if you remember Yanko, she said they asked her if she got registered today, would she go and carry out work which, as she's a traffic engineer, say for example, they're like, would you go and design a stadium, for example? Now, that's a question that has to do with the code of conduct. You may be tempted to say yes, but then you need to know that, okay, the code of conduct says we should do what we are competent in, and obviously advise the people to go probably look for an engineer who's competent in that. So the questions from the code of conduct won't be exactly what's written there. They'll use a trick question to get that. And then, sorry, I forgot an S at the end of contract. Please go through your contracts. Remember the timelines and refer to them during your interview. Let's say, for example, maybe you use the GCC or JBCC, and during your project management, they might ask you that, okay, there's a claim, how do you handle it? I'll use an example of an extension of time, which obviously will come, some come with an extension of time with cost, some come without cost. So now, remember, if you're on the contractor side, there's an intent to claim, which you have to put. And then there's a guide in say GCC or JBCC or NEC or FIDIC, depending on which one you're using, which will tell you that, okay, you have to say claim within 7 days. And then the consultants should respond, say within 14 or 21 days as per GCC. So you have to refer to that when answering a question that, okay, as per GCC, this is how I carried this, and this is how long I took to adjudicate, and this is how I responded. The other questions could be for conflict. They might ask you of when maybe the contractor is taking time, or you can see that they won't finish their work in time for delays and all that. So just remember you don't have to know the exact clause, but remember what it states. Because we are not project managers per se, but we are engineers. And then the next one is the email will still state it. It will tell you to prepare a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation. Please prepare the 15-minute PowerPoint presentation based on your report, say your engineering report. Don't prepare it based on the work that you are currently doing, because they can only assess you based on what you've submitted in your report. And the fact that they've called you for a professional review, it means that they were happy with what you have written, and they just want to confirm that, okay, what you have written and is what you are actually capable of. Because you might take someone's report who has written a very good report and find that that report is good enough to pass the experience appraiser and go for a professional review and use it. So at the same time, this PowerPoint presentation and the questions and answers that follow is to also check that. Now, during your presentation, you might find that, because it's 15 minutes, you might find that you'll spend 7 minutes on the first 3 outcomes. There's this guide that Simply Malebza has prepared, which will show you that, if I remember properly, outcomes 1, 2, 3, 7, and 9, they tie in together somehow. And those are the core outcomes. Those are the core engineering outcomes. So when presenting the first 3 outcomes, you'll find that you've actually covered 5 outcomes, and you might take 7 minutes of your time. Don't panic. We've all done it like that, because that's where the engineering problem solving is. And if you check when you write in your report, you'll find that outcome 1, 2, and 3 on your right, where they say your valuation, you will write that it's a CEP, which is complex engineering problem. While for, I think 4 outcomes, 4, 5, 6, and I think 9, I may be mixing them, you'll write it's a CEA, which is a complex engineering activity. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, and then once you're done preparing and you have gone through, say, your trial and run with someone, now it's the day of the interview. Like Yanko said, play your favorite music, or rather, she plays inspiring music, I play my favorite music. You dance if you like to dance alone. I'm not a good dancer, but behind closed doors, I did dance, and I was on high spirits, but at the same time, do remain calm and don't sweat, don't panic. So the first tip, which I think she also covered, was that please relax. It's a peer review session and not an interview. These guys are there to just review your experience. They're not there to interview you. That's why if you check, it's a session where you're just talking. You're actually discussing your report. One of my, the guys that assisted me, he said to me, take it as if you did a design and now you're sitting with the team at work before the design can be approved, and you're discussing the design, how you carried it, or if it's a project on site, you're discussing how you went about executing that project. That will help you calm down. And the good thing is some of the reviewers will actually help you chill. They might even share a joke a bit at the start, and even during the interview, they'll laugh with you so that you can relax. That's also to get you comfortable. And then where possible, if they ask you a question, do refer to your report when answering the questions. That will also show that it is you are the one who did the report. Sometimes they might ask you a question which maybe is not covered in your engineering report. Because mind you, the engineering report, say for PR-Eng, it has a limit of 6,000 words. But you might find that some of the things are in your TER. So you can tell them that, yes, actually, respond to the question and then tell them that, okay, actually, I did also state this in one of my TERs. Or if it's in the engineering report, do say that it's actually in your engineering report, but also answer the question that they asked you. And if you don't understand the question, please ask for clarity, because you might find that you answer what you're not asked, and that may discredit you. You find that maybe you knew the answer, but then you did not understand the question properly. And take time, like Yamko said, to think sometimes. Don't just jump into answering. And when they ask you a question, sometimes just ask them if they are done asking rather, and then respond after, because you don't want a case where they're still talking and then you get in. And then another tip is, please do not argue with the reviewers. Mind you, they are the ones who are going to make a recommendation to EXA, and sometimes you might come as arrogant while you're trying to emphasize a point. If there's any criticism that they give you or advice, please accept it and acknowledge that, okay, maybe I made a mistake here, but in the future I will rectify it. Mind you, we do not know everything, and being wrong in one question or in one of the aspects that they'll be reviewing doesn't mean that you won't get your PR. It's not like we have to get 100% of the questions. And let's say maybe there was a criticism that they gave to you. Please don't let it push you down. Remain focused, because this actually where I think your career will actually take a boom after, say, getting your PRN. So remain focused and remain calm. Sometimes we are different. Some people are good with words, they're good at explaining things. So you might find that some are unable to explain their stuff. So do draw sketches and then show them. If it's a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams interview, you can even use, say, maybe a paper. Let's say maybe you want to show them how the bending of, say it's a bending moment diagram, and you wanted to show them that how maybe the structure would bend. You can literally take a page and show them the direction of bending, or draw a sketch. You are allowed to ask them that, can I sketch this? And then they'll wait for you to sketch, and then you show them. Because sometimes you might not explain it clearly. And another important one, please speak in first person. Avoid using we did this, they did that, he did this, or she advised this, because it's your experience. I remember when I wrote my report, there was a part where if you check in the GCC, when before a payment certificate is prepared or is accepted, you actually have to go to site with the contractor's representative and go verify the quantities. So I wrote that we went and verified the quantities, and in the review, one of the reviewers asked me, by we, what do you mean? And then I was able to explain that, no, according to GCC, I have to go with the contractor's representative. So the we was referring to that representative. And then she's like, okay, just take note of this, that in the future, it's all about your experience and not what you did with someone else. And then at the end of the review, they may ask you that, what are you currently busy with? Like Simply Malebza stated that you might find that maybe you submit your report in June, and then maybe you go for the review in December. So they would love to know what you have been busy with during the year. It's just to know if you're still busy in engineering or other things, and maybe that might also help them see that, okay, you are still developing yourself as an engineer. That's just, I'll call it a bonus question. I think that's it for my slides. Thank you.
So something that I faced quite a bit while I was busy preparing to do my professional registration, and then I find that other people are also asking, is, does what I do, does it count towards being registered as a professional engineer? And I also went through the whole path of submitting, not getting my registration, and needing to make some changes, get some additional experience, etc. And the biggest thing that I learned was that you need to be the person responsible. I used to be quite a bit where I would be the person who might be recommending decisions, but I wouldn't be the person responsible for the decisions. So being responsible for the decisions is quite a big part of something that they're looking for. So that would fall in with degrees of responsibility E. And then for industrial engineering specifically, the industry that you work in is not the determining factor. Processes are universal. You can do your industrial engineering, PR Eng, and you can work in mining and banking and supply chain, data management, consulting, retail, telecommunications. I need some guidance from the other guys on the other disciplines, whether this is true in your case, but I do assume that it would be very similar, as ICSA is looking for particular outcomes, and you need to demonstrate your competence in those outcomes. Next slide, please, Rafilwe. Something that is also very important is to use the keywords or almost the jargon that the ICSA documentation uses. So to important documents for the professional engineers, it would look something similar for the technologists and technicians. It just has a different initial, is use those keywords in your report, in your experience report, and in your interview. So they constantly refer to complex engineering problems, complex engineering activities, and gives you examples and definitions of these, like use those specific words that they are using. In essence, help the reviewers to, when they're reading your document, to easily spot that you have met that specific requirement, so that they can almost tick off a box if they need to check, okay, have you met outcome 1? Then mention the specific words when you say, okay, outcome 1, and then you mention it. That is very, very important and very helpful. So that's with the complex engineering problems, complex engineering activities. And that document, to me personally, felt very overwhelming because it's these really long definitions with sometimes like 10 subpoints. It could contain these. And I found that breaking them into very smaller chunks and almost just saying, okay, so this is the problem. Okay, and that covers part A. Yes. Does it contain part B? Yes, it does. And breaking them down into small chunks and almost answering for myself on whether I am meeting this outcome. Okay, yes, I'm meeting outcome 1, A, B, C. Outcome 2, yes, outcome 2. And Assembly Malebza also said, especially in your engineering report, if something doesn't talk to the outcomes, take it out. When I needed to resubmit mine, I needed to take out quite a lot of things and add my new experience, and that was the guideline I followed. Like just that one question was, does the sentence that I'm writing add to one of the outcomes? If it doesn't, I removed it. Then something that I did that you can consider, it might help for you as well, is to have your reports language reviewed. So I asked somebody that is a language practitioner. She's also a friend of mine to just review my things. And that was quite helpful to understand whether I am explaining things simply and easily and comprehensively enough that somebody that did not have the same experiences that I did, that wasn't there for those projects, that it still explains it in enough detail that the reviewers or the panelists, anybody else that would read that report can understand it. So I found that quite helpful. And next slide, please, Rafilwe. But the language reviewed as well, it gave me a lot of extra thoughts about how I'm constructing my reports and making the flow more logical. So it really helped me quite a bit with that. Something that, so when I started my professional registration journey, my company did not have any PR Engs registered at that time. So yes, it is possible. Get it. You can have a mentor that's not in the same company as you. And then something that somebody has asked on the Q&A that I've answered there is when submitting your application, you need 2 professionally registered individuals to sign off on your submission. So your mentor needs to be a professionally registered individual and your referee as well. And as Assembly Malebza said, the different categories have different requirements. So PRN is 2, technologist and technician is both 3. I know this from very good experience from that. I submitted my application, what my mentor submitted her report, and then one of the referee reports was not a professionally registered engineer, but it was mostly my supervisor at work, and I asked him, and he's worked a lot with me to write and submit that. I got an email back from EXA to say that is not sufficient. So I had to get somebody else to fill in the referee report as well. So sooner rather than later, identify those people and build a relationship with them that they can also, from their side, feel confident that when they fill in this report, that they really do believe that you are ready to be registered. To ask somebody to fill in a report if they've only met you maybe 2 hours ago and have only talked to you for like 5 minutes, that's very difficult. So building up a relationship with them, talking to them, getting their experiences, their opinions, that is very, very helpful. So this group and platform that Simply Malebza is doing is a very good place to start doing that. So if you're not involved in that platform, get involved in your either the EXA platforms or your discipline-specific platform. So the voluntary associations that all the different disciplines have. Get involved there. Talk to those people. That's how I, for example, got my mentor initially. So I'm an industrial engineer, and I register with SAI, so that's South African Institute for Industrial Engineering. And I sent an email to them to say, okay, I want to embark on this journey. I do not have a mentor. Can they please assist? And they were really very kind. They sent out an email with my details to everybody that was registered, that is also registered with them. And then I had somebody reach out to me when I just started. So I got her details, contacted her, we met up, and that's also been very helpful. So your voluntary associations is also really there to help you with this. And ask, like this platform, like I wish I knew about it a couple of years ago before I started, because you kind of sometimes feel very alone being the only person that does this. And you aren't. We are really like a group of people that are here that want to help, that can help. So reach out. Thank you for being here, reaching out, and coming on this journey.
Okay, so I mean, I see even in a lot of the questions that have been going on since like the beginning of the session, my first point talks about to the length of your actual submission. So this is applicable whether you are going for PR technologists, PR eng, PR technician is don't write a Bible for your submission. Everything should be concise, to the point, and under 50 pages. That means everything from your TERs to your engineering report to the like the calendar of experience to your IPD documentation. A problem I struggled with when I was busy doing my submission. So I went on the submission process for maybe 1.5 years before I went and attended one of Lebo's masterclasses. After that masterclass, maybe in 3-4 months, I submitted. I didn't go for engineering appraisal. I went straight to PR interview. Everything after I submitted, I got my PR end within 3 months. But before that, I was like struggling by myself, writing a Bible. I sent it to people for review. People didn't want to review it because I had too many pages. I had too many calculations and everything, and I was not getting to the point. So what you want to do is you want to be concise as possible, try and summarize as much information, and focus on addressing the 11 outcomes. I see there's also some new candidates, some fresh graduates who are still confused about this. There's people that have lots of experience and the people that have no experience. So if you're like starting out, you're just out of varsity, the best thing you can do is try do your TERs as you go. Whether you do this as weekly reports or monthly reports, or even quarterly reports, just for yourself, because when you actually get to submitting, you don't want to remember what you were doing in year one of like your 5 or 10 years of experience. So it just makes it a lot easier to to remember what you did, because even I forgot what I was doing like back in 2015, 2016, versus when I actually submitted. The next point is also do not be afraid to help. Like almost all of the panelists here, including Lebo, like our details are available. You can reach out, you can ask for help. There are people within like your peers, your friends that you may have graduated with that are still working in engineering. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help, because everyone is willing to help. We're doing this session because we want to help. Then on the engineering report, and even in your TERs, you need to follow the lock and key method. What I mean by this is each of the outcomes is a lock, right? Like a lock that you need to open. And you only the only way to open that lock is with a key, and the key is your experience. So you need to take your experience and you need to look at the outcome, and you need to match your experience with that outcome. And like Lebo mentioned earlier, if it's not important, it doesn't need to be in the report. So at the end of the day, whether it's your engineering report, your TERs, your presentation, everything needs to speak to the outcome. So the outcome is your Bible, or the outcomes are your Bible. You need to ensure that everything you write, everything that you do is speaking to those 11 outcomes. When it's outcome 1, complex engineering problem, and Esty was kind enough to post all 11 outcomes in the chat, like you need to say, okay, how am I meeting this? For engineers, it's complex engineering problem. For technologists, it's broadly defined engineering problem. And then for technicians, it's clearly defined engineering problem. And at the end of the day, it's about that engineering problem. How are you using your experience to meet that outcome? Then, as everyone before me has also mentioned, it's better to have someone who's recently gone through the PR process, whether it's a PR eng, PR technologist, PR technician, who's recently done it, to go through the through your reports and review it, because they are more in line with what EXA is looking for now, who maybe did the process 20 years ago, and they'll tell you put this in your report, but then when you go into your interview, they ask you about the outcomes, but because you weren't in line with the outcomes, they then your report gets rejected, or you go for an engineering appraisal, and then you have to basically resubmit. So that's just on that point. Next slide, please, Refilwe. Another thing is, I know 2 of Lebo's masterclasses are on YouTube. So if you look for Inspire the Next Movement on YouTube, there's videos that Malebza has done. You can watch some of those videos on YouTube. They're about 1 hour to 2 hours long. They will give you a good way of like how an assessor will review and critique your engineering report. They focus mainly on the engineering report. And then there's also videos that were done by EXA, where they did a roadshow where they went to all of the universities back in 2016 and 2017. All of those videos are on YouTube. So I would recommend watching those videos. I watched all of those videos before I went while I was busy doing my reports. And they definitely help, because it's all about trying to get information to help you through the process. Because I know for me, I read the EXA documentation, like R-02 document, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I'm trying to write this document, but I don't understand. And then when I watched the YouTube videos, when I attended the masterclass, when I watched some of the masterclasses, then like everything for me at least became clear. But like I mentioned in the previous slide, don't be afraid to ask for help. Everyone here is reachable. On the next point, what a lot of people do, like as technical people, we focus on all of the technical details in outcome 1, 2, and 3. But at the end of the day, like whether we're solving technical problems, it's all about how we are making society a better place. So do not forget about outcome 6, 7, and 8. What are the international standards? How are you impacting the environment? What are the legal requirements? When you enter a project, you have to deal with a contract. You don't need to be an expert in contracts, but at the very least, you need to know what contract was used in this project that I was executing. Is it GCC? If you, like in my case, I deal a lot with in the electrical industry with Eskom, and then I need to know what does the NEC say. When I'm working in Africa, I either have GCC or a contract by the French government, and I don't need to be an expert in those contracts. I just need to know enough about them to say, okay, I'm working in Ghana, for example, they're using a GCC contract. What is applicable to me for the technical project that I'm executing? Then moving on to understanding the tree and the forest. What I've seen a lot of people do is they think that irrespective of how many years of experience you have, that going through this professional registration is like a huge task. It is a forest. And like what Esti was also saying earlier and what Malebza has been saying, you need to break it down into, don't just look at the forest. Remember that there's a forest, but that forest can only be made up of, for example, 10 trees, and deal with every single tree one by one. Like if you want to cut down the trees as an example, then you deal with one tree at a time. Like break down the problem, make it simple. Like if you're going to start going through the process of writing all of your documentation, do one TR at a time. If you want to do like one TR every single week, maybe on a weekend, or one TR every 2 weeks, and then or focus on doing your engineering report first and then start doing your TRs. How you decide to tackle that is entirely up to you, but always remember and try and keep it simple with one thing at a time. Maybe before you want to get into it, you want to watch your videos on YouTube, you want to read all of your documentation, and then actually start doing it. And like once you've done one TR, then you can move on to the next one, and the process just moves. Then during the interview, like my colleague mentioned earlier, that you want to also have content that you've worked on recently in your presentation, just to help in the conversation with the interview. For engineers, one question that they asked me was, like, when I was explaining one of my complex problems and the solution that I developed, why couldn't a technician or a technologist do the same job that I did? I then had to explain, well, because of the level of complexity and because of all of these unknown variables, why it was a complex problem as opposed to a broadly defined problem. But also they are like, when they felt that they weren't convinced about whether I met outcome 1 to 3, they asked, okay, well, maybe you can tell us about a recent project that you're working on. And before I actually went in with my slides, I actually put in 2 projects that I recently completed. I just put in a few pictures, and then I told them a bit about those projects, which helped them to be satisfied with me meeting outcomes 1 to 3. And then also outcome 9, which was engineering judgment. For my last 2 points, do not rush your submission. Like a lot of people think that, okay, I'm going to start doing this, and in 3 months, like I'm just going to submit, but then like you don't submit properly, or you don't present the information properly, then you get rejected, and then like you get demotivated from actually submitting it. But like, as the points that I've mentioned already, ask for help. Don't rush it. Like, try, break it down, do one at a time. If you can go faster, but also ask for someone to like help and review the documentation. Then for outcomes 1, 2, and 3, as has been mentioned earlier, use a minimum of 2 examples or 3 if you have like the space in your documentation for that. Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience. And I guess we move on to questions now.
So being the last speaker, obviously a lot of the other panelists have already said some of the things that is on my slide, but I made some notes, so I'm going to try and fill in a few gaps here and there. So in terms of your interview, when you receive that email, long-awaited email, make sure you read the email correctly so that you know whether you're being invited for a experience appraisal or for your actual professional review, okay? Because that's completely different. Then the rest of the slides, I'm going to focus on the actual professional review interview. So you need to give yourself enough time to prepare for the interview. Think about your interview almost as an exam. You need to study, you need to prep yourself. If you think about it, you have 60 to 90 minutes. It's not easy, as we all know. So make sure you're prepared. Also, the more prepared you are, the less stressed you will be. Okay. Then secondly, study your engineering report before your interview. You spend months writing or years writing your TERs, then finally you write your engineering report, you do your submission, and you submit it to EXA. Then 2 or 3 months goes by. By the time you get your invite for the actual interview, you forget what is in your report, okay? Or at least the finer details, okay? So one of the things was that you might remember the technical things of what you wrote, but do you remember the background of all the projects that you might have used? Especially if you're not just using one overall project and you're using a few examples per outcome, however you structure your report. Because remember, in your interview, your reviewers can ask you a question, not only about what you're presenting on during those 15 minutes, but also anything that you've mentioned in your report. So even if you just wrote a quick 2-sentence something about a report that you thought, I'm just adding it, maybe it would support, a bigger project that was your aim. They can go and ask you questions about that. So you don't want to sit in the interview and ah. You want to be able to answer their questions. Then, yeah, keep your audience in mind when presenting. So actually sort of one of the previous questions where the guy said that he was a little bit too specialized. That was me in my first round of my interview. Basically, it was a miss, right? You need to keep in mind that yes, you have 3 industry experts that you are presenting to, but that doesn't mean that they understand 100% or have extensive knowledge in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis. You might have, yes, it might be civil, but your interviewer might be, have a structural background. So if you're going to full on go into water demand and water demand management, then just make sure you give a bit of background and not just dive right into the most complex example that you can think of. Give them a little bit of background, just give them that intro so that they can follow what you are busy explaining. Along with that, a good tip, Esty also mentioned it, is have someone else review your report. Obviously, most of us give our engineering report to our mentors or a referee to read. The problem is those people have been working with you, or they're already technical. So they will automatically, when reading your report, fill in the gaps. It just happens. So give your report to a non-engineer, an accountant friend, a doctor friend, whoever, and have them read through it and see if they can follow. They don't necessarily have to in-depth understand the report, right? But can they follow what you are busy presenting? Does it make sense? Did you give enough of an intro and then flesh it out, etc., etc.? So that's quite important to do. Then probably the most important one that was the most difficult for me was sell yourself. Okay, it is not always second nature to everyone to to be confident, to use the words I, to it's not my thing. But in that interview, when you write a report, when you do your presentation, and when you're in your interview, you need to sell yourself. You need to use the word I. You need to say, I did this, I made this decision, etc., etc., etc. Afterwards, you can go back to, if you prefer, referring to the team, because no one works alone, etc., etc., etc. We all know that that's the case. Okay, we know that you didn't do it 100% by yourself, but it's very, very important that the interviewers don't question, okay, you made this statement. Did you do it? Did the team do it? How much were you involved? What was your actual role? You don't want them to start asking those questions. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Then Janko mentioned this right off the bat. It's 100% acceptable to say that I don't know, or this is outside my area of expertise and I need to go and either look it up, or I need to go reference something or talk to someone. They will most certainly get a question where you would have to say, I don't know. Okay. Esty mentioned this as well. They want to see, do you know that being registered, you don't know everything? Okay, you're not going to know everything. You need to know where your limitations are, and you need to know when to accept that you don't know. Otherwise, if I go and say, yes, of course, I'll sign off this bridge design, that thing will probably fall apart, or I won't be able to see where the flaws are in the design, because that's not my area of expertise. And that's what they want to ensure. In the end, they need to ensure the public safety. So keep that in mind. Then, know your general knowledge and best practices. So a lot of people focus largely on, obviously, the technical designs, and yes, I did this and this and this, and equations and drawings and what have you. Just don't forget about your contracts. So some of the previous questions were, do you have to know the exact clause, stuff like that? No, you don't. But know enough about your contract so that you can navigate yourself in the conversation. So, and just an important point on that is, especially with anyone that's been working with contracts for a while, there are very big differences between the 2010 and the 2015 GCC. So for anyone going into interviews now, make sure you know differences, because you no longer referred to as an engineer's representative, and they might call you out on that. One of my questions was actually, the interviewer asked something about the way he worded it. He used the word engineer's representative on site. Me to correct him to say, there's no longer such a thing as an engineer's representative. It's now a client's representative. Okay, so small things like that, especially with contracts. In my case, I had a contract specialist as one of the reviewers. So they won't ask you, oh, what does clause 10 say? But they do want to see if you know what's actually happening. Also, how your payment certificates are set up, what makes up your items, how are your rates made up, right? Some of that is also the type of questions that they ask is, you don't necessarily have to have done work with payment certificates for the past 5 years, right? It's just to make sure that you have worked with it and you do understand it, and you are aware what makes up what. Okay. The other thing that I think not a lot of people think about is, for example, your public liability, your public indemnity insurance. Know that along with your OSHAC, the NEMA, your EXA, as well as your EXA code of practice. Okay. They can ask you questions about all of those things. So look that up before you walk into the interview, definitely. Then lastly, so currently the EXA interviews are held via Microsoft Teams. It's actually it's nice. I like it. I've had the personal interview and I've had the online one. Maybe the online one is a little bit less intimidating, so there's that. But yeah, just make sure that you have good virtual meeting etiquette, right? So please don't sit there in your pajamas thinking that they can only see your face. Don't do that. Make sure that your surroundings are nice and neat and clean, if possible. Book a meeting room at work where you know you're not going to be interrupted. Obviously, we can't help if the neighbor's dog is barking or if there's Hardy-Does in the garden, that you can't help against. But then if you know that you can't control the noises at home, then rather opt for a meeting room at work. Make sure your camera is working properly. Make sure your speakers are working properly. Very importantly, make sure your internet is working properly, and have a backup as well, so that if anything happens and you get disconnected, that you have, let's say you are using fiber at home, make sure you have a dongle to get onto 3G if needed. You don't want to be disconnected and then try and get back in. Yeah, I think someone else has mentioned it as well. The moment your 15 minutes start, they do start assessing you from the get-go. So how professional are you? How good are you at communicating? Yeah, but it's not, I think Janko mentioned it, it really is like a conversation with your peers. It's not, you don't sit there and get judged, right? It really is a give and take conversation. So yeah, I think that was more or less me. Oh, I think one other thing I did as well, I made a note about that was when you do your submission, especially now, make sure you use the latest documents from EXA, because, for example, I had my whole thing written up, and when I saw in August last year, they they published a new new set of documents, which is actually quite nice. Everything is now combined, so you don't have to consolidate separate documents, which is nice. But then just make sure you are using the most recent revision of whatever it is by the time you do your actual submission. Okay, that's me.